Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session of Awaken and Unleash Your Inner Power in the 7-day retreat. We've got a very amazing, I would say even badass guest today. Hi, Dr. Cari Schaefer.
Oh,
Good to see you today. Thank you for being
glad
on.
to be here. Yep, always happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the subject of how the secret can come into freeing yourself from your past.
Mhm.
And my first question to you is, trauma is such a buzzworthy word, right? Everyone is throwing it around left and right. Micro trauma, macro trauma, which is true. And our nervous systems are sensitive sometimes to a various degree of maybe a micro trauma can feel like a macro trauma and
Right,
vice versa.
right.
And my question to that is, what is trauma to you
Mhm,
and how does it show up in someone's life?
mhm. Beautiful. So, the nervous system. So, I'm a doctor of holistic medicine. So, a lot of the answers are going to come. They're not going to come from the psychological perspective. They're going to
Mhm.
come from the body perspective,
Great.
right?
Thank you.
So, the nervous system is designed when we are little kids to have an experience and then learn from that experience. So, in the future, when you encounter something, you don't have to relearn how to respond. So, very simple example, if you touch a hot stove and you get burned, your nervous system learns that, oh, feel the heat, pull the hand away. It's reflexive. You don't have to keep touching that hot stove to learn not to do that. So it is part of what our body does. So our nervous systems are designed to keep us safe, to keep us alive. That is what biology cares about. Biology cares about your survival, our survival, right? And so biology is always geared towards that. So biology isn't actually as concerned with the happy moments as it is concerned with the threatening moments, right? And so in our nervous system, we have these programs that our body put down as a child that tell our body how to respond in the future. Now, one of the things that gets complicated with this is our primary caregivers, when we're little, are necessary for our survival. So when our primary caregiver seems unhappy with us or they're upset, it can imprint in our body in a way that says, oh my God, I'm in danger here. I'm in danger of surviving. So now you go through life, and when you experience something that was similar in some way, shape, or form, and similar can be a lot of things, literally the color of a room. If you had a traumatic event in a room that was colored blue, you could walk into a blue room and have that neurochemistry released, right? So that neurochemistry are little things, little peptides that tell our body have this response to this situation. So have you ever worked on something, but yet you're still getting what we call triggered? I call activated, but we call triggered by it, right? And you're like, God, I've been working on this so long. It's because you still have that program in your body that is active, that is firing off. So trauma is the same thing. It's a memory in your body that says, if this happens, it means this, respond like this, right? And so a trauma response is when we respond with, I'm not safe, something's wrong here, and we get a big neurochemical release. So when we take out the story of what happened and we just go down to the body and what is actually happening in the body, that's what's happening. Now, the beautiful thing about this is that those neurochemicals only last for 30 minutes for 3 minutes to 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So that's it, right? But if
Yeah, it's
we
like they say
start
it takes 90 seconds for an intense emotion to pass.
Exactly. Except when we start talking about it in our brain and we start telling people about it, then we say, create more neurochemistry, I'm still unsafe, I'm still unsafe, I'm still unsafe, right? And so when I first learned that, I was like, are you kidding? When I get triggered, it goes on for hours. Like, what's this 30 seconds to
Yeah.
because I'm recreating it with my thought processes, right?
Mhm.
Our physiology, our brain doesn't know the difference between thoughts and reality. So we can tell it that we're having this experience and we will get a release of these neurochemicals.
Mhm.
That makes sense? And so
Absolutely.
that's how I see trauma, but it's very body based.
Hmm.
And what happens is when our body is in a state of feeling like it's under threat, it looks to things in the past for the reason, right? Because it's trying to figure out how to respond. And so if our body is out of balance and stressed out, our physical body is stressed out, we can be activating those old programs just by that. So we walk around feeling like we're under the effect of these traumas. But in truth, if we were to get the body to balance out, those traumas would not keep being activated. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So you're saying the key to healing our triggers, our activations, as you call it, which I love. I love that reframe because that's another buzzword,
Yeah.
triggered.
Yeah.
Is the key to healing that is our body.
So the key, yes. So we have a neural program, a program in our limbic brain that says, respond to this if this happens in this way, release these chemicals. They get released, you have an emotional response. So the first step is to learn to not continue to activate that response. The first step is to do something I call a pattern interrupt. So the first thing you want to do is you want to interrupt the release of those chemicals to get you off the ledge, right? To get your body to calm down. Then what we want to start to do is we want to start to develop neural pathways between your frontal brain and that part. Your frontal brain is your conscious brain, right? The part of you that says, I can't believe I'm reacting to this again. I've done so much work on it, right? And so there's sort of different layers of working with these responses in our body. The first layer is to develop what I call the witness mind. And that is the part that recognizes I'm in an activation, right? So the minute that you start to be able to say, and the word somebody might use is trigger, but the minute you start to be able to say, wow, I'm triggered right now, witness mind is up. Because otherwise we're just in it. We're just raging. We just don't
We're
know
out
it.
of control
Out
and
of
we're completely
control.
unconscious to our responses or rather
Exactly.
reactions.
Right. So that's the first step, is to start to bring in the conscious mind that says, this frontal brain, this, the wise brain that says, oh, I'm activated right now. I've got neurochemistry firing. You recognize it. That's the first stage, right? Once you recognize it, then you want to do a pattern interrupt in order to get that neurochemistry to calm down. Once it's calmer, you can start to work with it. And when you start to work with it, and we can talk about that, is you start to get a neural pathway to develop between your frontal brain and that trigger. And when that happens, when you have a neural pathway, this gets fired, right? The activation happens. Then that the frontal brain will come online, and now you've got choice. You're not just at the effect of the neurochemistry. I think it was Nisargadatta that said that it's not even enlightened beings get activated, get triggered. It's not the trigger, it's what you do the second after the trigger. So with them, it's the trigger isn't velcroing. It's like trigger, boom, and then they're out of it. They're back into higher consciousness. They're not getting stuck in that frame. So it's a human response. It's a normal part of our design in our nervous system to have these things. It's just how much weight we give them, how much importance we give them, how much story we create around them determines how much they affect our life.
So the more that we can take a step back, turn our observer on, become aware that we're activated, is the more we get a choice to actually react instead of respond. And that's where our power truly lies, because we are not taken over by our environment or by the person you might be in conflict with, or even a situation that you're in conflict with. You take your power back by choosing again.
Yes. And Violetta, if you think about it, not every human, but most humans, the amount of time in your life that you've actually been in physical harm's way is very small. Like if you added it up, your entire life Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, like the amount, you know, that the car is actually barreling towards you, that somebody has a gun at you, that, you know, somebody is threatening you physically, that where you're, you know, you're really sick and you're in the hospital fighting for your life. That's usually a very small amount of time. And yet we spend the majority of our life trying to avoid those experiences.
Wow, that you make such a great point there. And that contrast of time, I think, really can click in someone's mind and go, wait a minute, why am I giving so much of my precious life force energy to an event that only happened for 30 minutes?
Right. You know, years and years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so when we start to realize it, it empowers us to start to take our life back from these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to offer to your audience some pattern interrupts.
Absolutely. Please. Thank you so
Okay.
much for
So
offering
for the
this.
first thing you want to do with a pattern interrupt is you want to just occupy the otherwise occupy the brain. So I like to use, for some people at work, something called emotional freedom technique. Have you heard of that?
Absolutely. I practice this with my clients too, EFT.
Beautiful, right. So it's available for, you know, the basics
Yes.
outline of it
Wildly
online,
accessible right now.
widely accessible. But basically, all you want to start doing is you want to start asserting that I'm okay and start tapping somewhere on your body. Why? Because this is a distraction. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay, even though I'm okay, even though my boss just yelled at me. I'm okay, even though whatever it is, just I'm okay,
Yeah.
even though that car just almost rear-ended me. I'm okay. And you just do that until you start to feel that neurochemistry calm down and you
Mm-hmm.
start to come back to more of a baseline. Another pattern interrupt is what animals do in nature is they shake. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
alone and you can do this, just start shaking, put on some music and shake it out until that cortisol, those stress hormones start to come back down. That's another great one. Another one is simple. Put on a positive song and sing the lyrics, but it has to be a positive song that doesn't have activation,
Yeah.
and sing the lyrics for those 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can take a walk outside and you can name, you have to say it. Look at the pretty flower. Look at the pretty trees. Oh, look how beautiful the sky is. Focus on the
Mm-hmm.
positive aspects of what you are seeing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's another one. You can just go to gratitude. You can start to say gratitude. I'm so grateful for this. Start focusing on the things in your life that are working. Why are we doing this? We're just allowing that neurochemistry, those 2 minutes, to wind itself down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't start thinking and creating more of it and get stuck in the loop. Now, the trick is, once you do that, you need to go to step 2, because otherwise you'll start thinking about it and you'll recreate it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So step 2 is to start to form the neural pathway between your conscious brain and the part of your brain that's triggered. And we do that. There's 3 words I like to have people remember: accept, ask, acknowledge, and accept. Ask, acknowledge, and accept. Ask, acknowledge, and accept. So the first thing you do is you start talking to the part of your brain that's triggered, right? Some
Yeah.
people call this parts work. You know,
Yeah.
that part that is triggered is not you. You are the one who is observing it all. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not you, right?
I love
And
that
so,
separation.
right? And so you start to ask it questions. Like if you were observing a child who was upset, because the secret is that most of these triggers were imprinted when you were a child. So it has a child's mentality,
Yeah.
right? If you ever have a friend who gets angry a lot, you know, they have a short fuse, they
Yeah.
probably have a trigger from when they were 2 and 3 years old, because that's
Mm-hmm.
all that 2 and 3-year-olds had available to them, right?
Yeah. And it's crazy how we can regress back into
They
that
can
memory
so regress back into it because then,
instantaneously.
yeah, the neurochemistry that's released, that's the intelligence of it was whenever it
Yes.
was programmed, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
why it's
Fascinating.
outdated, because you don't have your frontal brain, you know, with you.
Yeah, it's not developed yet. And some people stay there in
Yes.
the underdeveloped part of childhood, don't they?
Yes, in that, well, they stay with that part of their brain controlling their life, right?
Mhm.
They're literally living in the past.
Yeah.
And so when you start to ask it questions, how are you feeling right now? It looks like you're feeling anger right now. Is that correct? You really want to verify. And believe
Mhm.
it or not, initially it may not, but if you keep doing this, you'll get answers. And then when you get an answer, you want to acknowledge, I totally understand why you would be feeling that way right now. That wasn't very nice what that person did, or that, whatever it is, you just acknowledge it. You let it know that it's heard. I know this sounds silly, but it really, from a neurochemical perspective, it is not silly. Because if you think about the reason why we have a lot of the stuff from our past as imprints, it's because nobody was seeing us and nobody was able to acknowledge us. Our caregivers were wrapped up in their own experience and they weren't seeing it. I learned this, Violetta, when I had a woman I was working with who had a son. And I often work with people over time. I become sort of their primary person. So
Of course.
I met him when he was very little and he was now 2. And so he had known me, but she brought him into my office when I was seeing people in the office, and he started to freak out and she couldn't get him calmed down. She had to leave. She called me and she said, Cari, I had taken him to the dentist, and the dentist had walked into the room. I was holding him, walked in the room from behind him, stabbed a needle in his butt, injected him, knocked him out, and then put him in a straitjacket and did dental surgery. And ever since then, anybody of authority, he is petrified.
Wow. Yeah, I relate to that because I had that similar kind of medical trauma, and I really had to overcome.
Right?
And I would regress back as a child when I would get my blood drawn. So this
little guy, he had very, very tall parents. He was 2 years old, but he looked like he was 4. He was dark skinned. And imagine if he went through his life with a trigger around authority, it could turn into something really not good,
Absolutely.
And so what was happening is every time she'd bring him in, we'd go, you don't have to be scared. You don't have to be scared. Wasn't helping him. And finally I said to her, can we do a little bit of NET? Because we can use the mommy. And we did. And what came up was anger, not fear. And I said to him, and he was, no, no, no. And I looked at him and I said, are you angry? And he turned around and he looked at me, his eyes got big, and he went, and I said, I have every right to be angry. And once we acknowledged the actual thing, he started
so moved right now.
Right? He started to be able to process that event, and he started to be able to move beyond it.
Wow.
So I realized that what would happen to us as children often was, oh, honey, you don't need to be scared, right? Oh, you don't need to, oh, it's all fine. That's not how we were.
Invalidating.
It is invalidating. And so we go through our life feeling like we're wrong and our perceptions are wrong. And what these programs need is somebody, us, to recognize them, to really sleuth and find out what the feeling is, and then acknowledge it. And once it gets acknowledged, that neural pathway between the frontal brain starts to develop. And look at NET, neuro-emotional technique, has done research on this and has shown on functional MRIs the connection developing.
Wow.
Really amazing. And then now once we, and so we want to keep doing that work every time it triggers to make a bigger pathway, because you've been running that program and that pathway is really well developed, but we want to really develop this pathway. And we work with it and we work with it. And eventually what happens is this fires, and then the frontal brain comes right online. And then we go right in and be like, I see you are activated. I'm here. I love. And then the last part is the acceptance, being able to accept that we have a part of ourselves that had that experience and that gets activated sometimes. And it doesn't mean we're wrong or we're bad. Just no story about us. We had an experience. Our body created a program in order to attempt to survive. That program's getting activated. End of story. Literally, end of story.
That's it. There's no one to blame here. And the ego wants to point fingers and blame so that we can take away our work.
Yeah.
With doing that. And
the ego's job, a lot of things with Violetta, people think the ego is bad. The ego's job is just to keep us alive.
Correct.
And these programs are part of the ego, right? And their job is to just keep us alive.
It's in survival mode.
It's a survival. And if we recognize that the programs are just old and they're not sophisticated. We want to
Yes.
update them, because when you get that neural pathway formed, now you can go in and start to form that part of your brain. Hey, we're an adult now. And literally, it's so funny when you do this, that little part of the brain will be like, really? Uh-huh. We've
Yeah.
all grown up. Really? Uh-huh. And
Yeah.
we're actually a doctor of holistic medicine. Really? Uh-huh. And we, and you literally can update the part of your brain so that
Yeah.
it comes to present day instead of being locked
Mhm.
past. And that's why I say how we free ourselves from our past.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm blown away. I just thought that this work can literally heal your timeline, your past, your present, and your future.
Totally.
Right? All of your timelines will come together and you can collapse old timelines, your past, and recreate your future, recreate your present and into your future, and really live a powerful life full of choice, autonomy, and sovereignty. Nothing can take over you.
Yeah. And if it does, you now know what to do,
Have
right? You
tools.
go like, oh, I'm triggered. And
Mhm.
anybody who's been doing their work knows that when we're in a trigger, it's not the time to talk to your partner about it. It's not the time to solve a problem. It's not the time to write the email. I'll do this with my husband sometimes. I'm like, here's the email. Can you rewrite it? Because I know like it is not going to help the situation. Look at, we all get triggered. It's just starting to
Absolutely.
recognize when we're triggered,
Yeah.
time to calm yourself down, get back in
Mhm.
control before you take action. Because if
Mhm.
you do it from the trigger, what do you get back? A trigger from
Yeah.
somebody else. You get
You'll
back
pile up and you make more of a mess.
and
So you do
bigger.
the hard thing first, just stepping away, regulating yourselves,
Yes.
and then coming back. Well,
Yeah.
that is beautiful. Was there another way to self-regulate that you wanted to mention, or was that
That's the primary one. But
the
what I
primary
want
one?
to talk about is, I really want to talk about how what role these old programs play in our physiology and our physical health, right?
Please.
Because we all come to this earth, I believe, as these very divinely aligned light beings. Some of us will come in with already pre-programmed stuff from our genetic lineage, right? Some people, you see it a lot in like people who have the lineage of people who went through the Holocaust, relatives. You see in the way they respond, that program that got passed on through those genetics, right? So there
Absolutely.
is some of that, but most of us come in, we're fairly clean slates. We have some stuff, and then we start to learn. But most of what we learn in our childhood is to down regulate our authentic self. So we learn these things, or these programs that say, I'm not safe if I show up in my fullness, right? Someone yelled at us when we were having fun and being loud, right? And oh, I'm not safe if I'm having fun and being loud. So we down regulate, right? Or some other thing happens that says, I need to make myself small to stay out of harm's way. Or there's something wrong with me. That was a big one for me that played a role in my health journey. I had a program that said there's something wrong with me that is making me be unlovable, right? So we have these programs. They're a subconscious belief that is affecting how much light we let out into the world. In order for our light to be dimmed, our physiology has to be dimmed.
Absolutely.
So our physiology getting dimmed means that our body has to change in some way to be in alignment with that old belief that there's something wrong with me. I'm unlovable. I'm too much. I'm too big, right? I really have seen over and over and over again that the immune challenges we have in our body, the gut dysbiosis we have in our body, they are helping us be in alignment with those old beliefs. So I find when we want to shift our old programming, it really helps if we work with our physiology. And when we want to shift our physiology, it really helps when we work with our old programming, because the two of them are in cahoots together to down regulate the light being that you are.
Wow, beautiful. They go hand in hand,
They
and you
go
can access the mind and then access the body, or the body and then the mind. And we have options to do that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So if you're a person, let's say you've had a digestive imbalance for years and you worked with it, it doesn't quite go away, I can pretty much guarantee you that there is an outdated survival program that is keeping that imbalance in place. And so if you're a person that's worked with it physically, and you now you might want to look at working it with it more from that psycho-emotional spiritual perspective. Likewise, if you're a person who has done her therapy, done the stuff, and yet you still have this physical thing that won't quite resolve, or even the emotional thing that won't quite resolve, you want to go to the physical and look. I think when we talked before, I told you the story. If I didn't, I'll tell it now. Where I had a client who had had a trauma in her past and had worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And what was keeping that trauma active was she had a gluten intolerance that was causing inflammation in her brain. Her body was sensing something was wrong. So it kept going back to the past and saying, it's due to that. It's due to that trauma. It's due to that trauma. When we got her off of gluten, she was able to resolve her relationship to that issue from her past and come into the present, and she no longer needed to continue to process the trauma. She had done that work. It was this irritation in her physical body that was keeping her brain going, where's the problem, and all it could find was that past event, because her current life was good. Right. And so it kept going to the past, but it wasn't the past that needed to be looked at. It was something in her physical body. So it's both. It's really working with and looking at both that really can help the body free itself from these things of our past, come to present day, and be able to start to learn to actually thrive in the present day, right?
And our body will imprint the events that had occurred, right? Because the body keeps the score.
Yes.
So we can access those memories and events in our body, and we can track the charge.
Yes, totally. And what neuro-emotional technique does is it actually finds the meridian channel that it's stored in and then helps release it out of that meridian and actually reset it like a circuit breaker. So that in one of the stories I love, I had a woman, she was a therapist, and so obviously has done her work, right? And she came to me and she says, I'm going to break up with my boyfriend. And I said, why? And she said, I cannot handle him in my house. Like it triggers my OCD off the charts, and I just can't do it. And I said, well, could we just maybe do a little bit of work on that? And she rolls her eyes and she's like, fine, Cari, because she pretends like she doesn't like doing it, right? But she's a therapist.
I've already done this work.
I've done this work, Cari, but fine. So we do a clearing around it, and I don't remember what it came out. Went back to in her past, and we do a clearing. And the next time she comes in, a few weeks later, I said, so how's it going with your boyfriend? She said, oh, great. I gave him a key to my house. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, what happened to the I can't? She looked at me like, what? She couldn't even remember. She was like, I'm going to break up with him. She didn't remember it, right? Wow. Because how
powerful the work is.
Done the work, right? And we just had to clear it from her meridian system, and then it was gone. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know, I don't remember that. Was I?"
Oh my God, amazing, amazing. Basically, when you focus on your body and healing the little creepy crawlers that come up, it can also give you the most impeccable relationships, and the way you show up in your life and your relationships will increase.
Yeah,
to a higher degree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful story.
It's really looking at both, right? It's really working with both. And a lot of times people will come in like, nope, I just want to do that. Not anymore, because now I'm like, sorry, you don't work with me if you're not doing both, right? But back in the day, before I was very clear on this fact, I had a woman come in and she had this physical thing going on, and I was like, and she was like, nope, I'm not. And I finally was like, that's totally fine. Let me refer you to somebody who doesn't see the universe that way, right? Because in my universe, I need to do both for
I'm so happy you keep your authenticity stamp on that, because when we're working with people who really can get activated when we hit a nerve, which is what they're asking us to do, right? Technically, there's so much resistance. to that. And there's an art to moving around a client's resistance. And I think anyone who may be listening, maybe right now is like, oh boy, I know there's maybe something I need to work on. So, and physically, have you experienced in a client that there's resistance to like breaking free? And how do you work with that resistance?
Sure. So I use my training in NET to help clear it. But people can do somatic body work as well. Somatic work that some people really going in through the body is really the most powerful way for them. But there is a reminder that you also want to be working, if you've got, say, a messed up digestive tract, you want to be doing that work too, because it's kind of living in there, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yes, going in through the body is a really, and now with your work, how do you work with it? I'm curious.
So what I do with them is I ask them to track the charge in the body when they're
Oh,
talking about an instance or an event, and I could see their vocal tone is changing, and I watch them like a hawk, and their physiology changes, and something they'll almost become slightly in different, a different person.
Yes, right.
Right? It's so fascinating to see that.
It's so fascinating.
Sharing our stories.
I know. I was working with somebody and she was in it and she was like, I have no support. No one's supporting me. Meanwhile, of course, we're in a session where she's getting support, right? But that's the story. And literally the voice is a little girl's voice, right?
Oh my God, I'm getting chills right now. That's so
true.
true.
Right. And she's going, and she's so in it, And so our job is to stay really neutral, no matter what they're directing us, no matter what they're saying. The one for me that I had to grow in as a practitioner, if there's any practitioners listening, for me, a trigger was someone's anger being directed at me when they were blame, right? The blame that can happen. And I had to grow into becoming neutral and knowing that when they're doing that, that's usually like we're right at a potential for a big opening, right?
Absolutely. Conflict can be the bridge to connection.
Yeah, totally. And so staying open, staying grounded, and knowing that they're just really in their trigger at the moment is so powerful. A lot of acknowledgement to helping them break free into seeing the story from their past that's being activated, that's showing up in the room, right?
That's so powerful. It's like calling out the big elephant in the room and taking it out of the door once and for all.
Right.
One thing I want to tell you, and I would love to get your opinion on this, that I do with my clients is it's neuro-linguistic approach is when we track the charge of where the event is coming up, we also speak into that. Like ask your liver if it's coming from the liver, or they put their hands like I ask you put your hands where you're feeling it, and they don't know, but I'll know it's maybe it's their kidneys, and also as an intuitive, I'll be able to see where it's coming from, and I'll ask them to speak into that part and also receive a message. If your liver could speak to, what would it say right now? If your adrenal glands can speak to right now, what would they say? Oftentimes, I'm so tired and burnt out, I need to relax, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so do you how do you view neurolinguistics in the body? Do you ask any of your clients to speak into the parts of their
So it can be very fluid, but mostly what I do is give voice. So I identify usually the character that created the imprint, the age, and what was going on, actually the time when that imprint was created. And then, yes, we got that imprint to speak. And very often some people will be like, I don't know. And, I'll ask them like, so I don't know. So then I go into make believe. Okay, you and I are writing a story. And you are writing a story about a little girl who's this age, and this little girl is experiencing this. What would that little girl emotional reality, what would be going on for her? What would she be standing like if you're writing a story? And then they go into their imagination, which guess what? Goes back and tells exactly the story of what was going on with them at that time,
Absolutely.
right? That's where
manipulating them in the right way.
Yeah, that's where and I tell them afterwards, that's why we did that, right? The imagination. But sometimes people think that they try to use the conscious brain. We're in the subconscious. So go going into imagination can really help people. Like if you're going to write a story about somebody that was having this, what would it be? And then they come out with it and they get the same emotional clearing. You know, sometimes it's, you know, I've had cases where I had a woman 25 years in anxiety, and she had done all these psychology work on it, and she'd done the physical work. And so I was new to the emotional work. And so I said, would you be willing to try it? And she said, sure. We did one session, and 25 years of living in anxiety vanished, to the point that she said, she called me up and she said, Cari, I don't know what to do with myself because I spent all my time managing my anxiety and I don't have it anymore. Right? Because it was just a piece that hadn't been found, and we were able to pull that thread out. And like I said, I was new to the technique, so I was like, oh, let's see what happens, right?
Yeah.
But she had this profound effect. And it was, you know, her anxiety was causing hardship in her marriage and so many things. And so getting freed from it was like a whole new story in her life. And then you have to learn how to live without it, because if it's a habit, it can be a bad habit too.
Yes, and I've also seen people who don't know what to do with all the spaciousness that's there after the wound has been licked a bit, and they almost don't know what to do with themselves because they feel so free, and it's almost like starting your life over again. It's a liberating experience.
And I'll tell you, I had a program when I was working with healing myself where I saw that I bored and loneliness were intolerable to me, and I was much more comfortable with fatigue. And when I was fatigued, I didn't feel bored and lonely, because when I was fatigued, I was happy to be alone and happy to be not doing anything. And so as I was healing, I'd get my energy back, I'd hit boredom and loneliness, and I'd go back into fatigue, because it was my body would make some choice. I would do something to recreate a fatigue state, because I was so much more comfortable in fatigue than I was in boredom and loneliness. And so I had to learn to meet boredom and loneliness and be okay there. And as you know, if we're bored and lonely long enough, we'll change it. We'll go out and meet a friend. We'll do something, right?
Absolutely.
But I had myself in this vicious loop where I kept cycling back into fatigue because it was much more comfortable than bored and lonely.
That's fascinating.
And that's where I was recreating my own health challenge, right?
Yeah, and you make a great point there, because our thoughts will create the dis-ease in our body. So if we can clean and detox our minds, naturally our bodies will follow.
Yeah, and we also have to realize that we have to retrain the habits, because the super highway of focusing on what isn't working that has been developed over years of doing that, particularly if we haven't been feeling well or we don't feel safe, we've got to now develop a new neural pathway that says, I am safe, I am okay. And so one of the things that I have people do is, if you're in an activation, go to right here, right now, and do a reality check right here, right now. Am I in danger? In most cases, for most of us, right here, right now, we are safe. Right here, right now, we have food. Right here, right now, we have a roof over our head. Right here, right now, there's no threat. So we have to go and bring ourselves back to the here and now and really train ourselves to do that. Because otherwise our brain, I have one of those brains that just loves to focus on what isn't working. Right?
Yeah.
It's so good at that. It's been doing that for years.
Especially if you're a problem solver by nature.
Exactly, right? Which I am, right?
Yeah.
Right in towards what isn't working. Let's take care of it. And I used to do that with my clients. And what I realized was I got them better to a point, but they never really got well. Well, why? Because we were always fixing them. And when we're fixing somebody, we're fixing that there's a problem, right? And that is saying to the subconscious, there's something wrong with you. We have to fix you.
Yeah.
Now I look for, yes, we look for things we can improve upon.
Yes.
But I look for what's working. I look for their light. I look for how we can free more of their light. I get them focusing on that.
Yeah.
Because as long as we believe there's something wrong with us that needs fixing, we're focusing on the probably the thing that started the health problem in the first place.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That feeling that there's something wrong with me. There's not enough. I'm not lovable. And the truth is, everybody deserves love. no matter what. If you think about a child who's really misbehaving and you're watching them, do they still deserve love? Of course they do. They're misbehaving because they don't feel like anybody's seeing them or hearing them or getting it, right? They need more love, not less. We need more love, not less.
Yeah.
So
And when you think you're giving enough, give just a little bit more.
just a little bit more, because the truth is that we learn how to, we either give love to ourselves through doing something that isn't good for us, right? We self-soothe, not really give love, but we self-soothe. And so I call it like with a slap, like you go eat the cake. When you know the cake isn't going to make you feel good, you go drink the extra alcohol when you know you're not going to wake up feeling good the next morning. You go eat the fast food when you know you're not going to feel good the next morning, but it feels in the moment like it's a soothe. So we have to really start to say, okay, that isn't loving. So what is loving? What would be a loving thing? Maybe it's calling up a girlfriend and having a lovely talk with her, somebody who you can just get down and dirty with for a minute, not be so bright and conscious, or maybe it's taking a bath, or maybe it's watching a comedy movie, or maybe it's taking a walk in nature, so that afterwards we literally actually feel good,
Yeah, there are so many ways we can self-soothe that are more so in the negative spectrum. And then there are also so many amazing things we can also choose from that are more so on the positive spectrum. And we can forego our desire to have instant gratification for long-term gratification. And that's the discipline that can come in when we heal our bodies.
Yes. And if we do the less than positive instant gratification, we forgive ourselves and we love ourselves anyway, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Otherwise, we can get into the vicious cycle of shame and blame and all that stuff. No. It's okay. It's okay. You ate the thing. Okay. You're still lovable, right? I still love you, right? That's it, And so it's just really getting out of that pattern and starting to focus on the things in our life that are working, the parts of ourselves that we do like. And then we can lovingly learn to make different choices, support the parts that we don't want to be ruling our life. It's not that we want to get rid of these parts. We just don't want them driving our car.
We want to integrate them. And that's what Carl Jung called shadow work, right?
Yes.
We would integrate the unconscious and the shadow aspects while focusing on our light, like the way that you do with your clients, which is a fascinating approach to bringing out the soul and saying, you know what, I'm happy to work on these things. Actually, this is not work after all.
Right.
We have more of an integrated, wholesome self, even with our little idiosyncrasies and our path of us still healing, because the path is never done, right? This journey is never over.
Never over. One of my spiritual teachers, who was one of the most clear, out of ego, awake beings that I've had the pleasure of being in the presence of, he talks all the time about how it's a constant awakening and a constant awakening and a constant awakening, right? We're always awakening or not, like depending on the choices we're making and what we're doing. And so we're never done. It's not like we're done. But when we make friends with these aspects of our personality, I'm going to tell you a quick funny story, because it happened. So I was when I was young, I was bullied. They would call it bullying now. Back then, I didn't know what it was. I was, picked on, whatever. People waited to beat me up. They called me nicknames, tighty bowl, because I wore pants. I wore hand-me-downs that were too tight, and so I have triggers in my body around that. And for many years, like if I had to go to an event, what I was going to wear, I'd start planning, months in advance. Like it was a thing for me to make sure I showed up in a way that I wasn't going to be made fun of, right? Of course, I'm not going to be made fun of now, but it still was in my system. So I was going wedding dress shopping, and I wasn't doing a traditional wedding dress. So I decided to go in Beverly Hills. Saks Fifth Avenue used to have a really lovely dress department. So I decided to go to Neiman Marcus and Saks Fifth Avenue. They're next to each other, and look for wedding dresses. So as I'm walking in the door, there's a group of women. I got married when I was 50. So these women are probably 35, and they were just so. They had perfect nails, from my quick assessment, perfect nails, perfect hair, perfect skin, no wrinkles, no, nothing, perfect clothing. And it activated that little girl in me who used to be made fun of, right? For not perfect. And I watched it as it got activated, but it was so strong in me that I didn't, at that time, I didn't know about the pattern interrupt trick yet. And so I'm walking through Neiman's and I can't find the dress department, and I can't ask, because if I ask, they're going to know I don't belong. And I'm walking around. And so I leave Neiman's and I go to Saks. And again, I can't find the dress department, and I'm walking around, but I can't ask anybody. And I'm walking through this one department, and there's a salesman in there, and he's dressed, he's just totally to the nines. And he's like, oh my God, I love your boots to me. And I'm like, because I have all these like Spanish boots with these red crosses. And I'm like, oh my God, he's making fun of me, right?
Right, that's where the mind's going.
The neurochemistry is completely flooding me to the point that I can't do anything but leave. And so I go to leave, and I want to get my ticket validated, but I don't know if they still validate. I haven't been there in several years, so I can't ask. So I walk out the door and I pay $25 for parking as I'm calling up my girlfriend and telling her, and I'm laughing at the same time that I'm fully in the neurochemistry, because I know what's happening.
Yeah.
But in the moment, I can't do anything about it.
Right.
And like, you did what? And I'm telling her, we are laughing, we are cracking up, which of course helps the neurochemistry finally come
It
down.
does.
But I was so under the influence that I was powerless to do anything other than just like get out of the store.
Get out. Right. That's the run response.
Right?
Let's just get out of here.
Get out of here. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
But it was all just an old program that I knew was happening. But when I was in it, I couldn't do anything else about it. But
that's so human.
Right? It turns out that Saks doesn't have a dress department anymore. And,
so you don't have to go back there now.
I didn't have to go back there. But I think I would have been able to ask for directions, like,
yeah.
Okay, but I haven't been to the store in a while,
Oh, wow. I also think, thank you for sharing your story there. It's so relatable, I'm sure to any woman listening, to some degree, our physical image and our beauty can be activating for us.
Well, for me, my mom, I love my mom, adore my mom. But when I was a little girl, she used to joke, I'm a strong-willed individual. And I used to think like, I used to have that thing like, my mom, she didn't, whatever. No, I was probably a very hard child to raise. Like my phone, I pick up my phone, and if you ask me a question, I don't know the answer, I'm looking it up, right? I want to know. I've got that curious mind. When I was a little kid, I was probably like, why, like every 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And I also was like one of those kids that had to run off and check things out. My mom was probably chasing me, right? But she used to say to me, if you weren't so cute, I would have killed you. Well, my little brain took that to mean real, right? And so later in life, when I started aging, I went through a whole thing, and I had to trace it back. And then I had the imprints of the girls, making fun of me, waiting to pick me up because of how I looked. I had to trace it back to that little girl who thought she was going to die if she wasn't cute.
If she wasn't cute. Wow. That is so fascinating, the way that you're able to rectify that in your mind.
And it's so interesting, as you do this work, what happens is you literally, and I know this happens with you with your clients because of things you said, you literally start to rewrite your past. It's not that those things didn't happen, it's that they were moments surrounded by all these other stories, and we only remember the negative moments. But when we start to reprogram our relationship to those quote unquote negative experiences, which truthfully were just training grounds for us, right? Now, when someone is upset at me or judges me or whatever, I don't have the trigger because I got the experience of having that experience, right?
Yeah, you move through it, and you have compassion for them when they're experiencing
exactly. You now can have compassion for them because what was happening in their world that they needed to pick on somebody, right? But as this starts happening, you start to remember different stories from your past. So your past literally rewrites. I remember reading in Richard Bach's book, one of Richard Bach's books. He was one of my childhood sort of people I read to my first experience with sort of growth and learning. And he said you can rewrite your past. And I was like, how can you rewrite your past? It is no, you remember different stories. You remember different, and you see the stories differently. Like my mom saying, you know, I remember that the moment that I got that, like, oh my gosh, I was probably really hard to raise, was when I was watching a friend of mine's little Aries boy. He was born on the same day as me.
Wow.
And I was watching him navigate the world, and I was like, oh wow, oh yeah, oh,
You saw yourself.
I was hard to raise.
You have all this fire, all of this cardinal energy, which is initiatory. You initiate change.
Right,
You're a
exactly.
trailblazer,
Yeah,
a firecracker.
we were on a hike and he couldn't go the path we were going. He had to go his own path. And I was like, as a parent, that's so hard. But oh my God, that was me.
Yeah.
Mom, I'm so sorry, right? Like the story completely changed.
How beautiful. All of these moments are micro moments for healing along the path.
Totally.
And for you to witness, have the vision to see that, that's what can happen when you do the work.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
the synchronicities that reflect back to you.
I know that we're getting up on time, but
oh my God, I could talk to you for hours.
I know. So I love to like think of it as like the game of life. Like I know there's a game of life. I used to love it. I don't remember it, but I call it the game of life. It's kind of like a combination of life and Monopoly. So you're going through life, and as you go, you have experiences, and you're collecting stuff. Right? You're collecting these stories. And then at some point you get the get out of jail card free, right? And then when you do that, you turn around on the board and you start going backwards, and you start to look at the stories, and you start to say, hey, what did I actually learn from this experience? What can I actually take away from it? And that's a benefit to me. What, maybe it's just that I was resilient and I survived a really sucky situation.
Yeah.
But that's okay. You are resilient and you did just survive. And so you get to start to go and take off those experiences and literally put them down, and then collect the gift that they have for us, the gold, right? And so you get to go around and you get to like collect the wisdom from your life.
I love that.
And then you get to stand in who you are now with the amazing wisdom that you've gained from this life experience that you've had. And quite truthfully, the more awful our childhood was, the more gifts there are for us, the more actually things that we can be like, wow, I survived, and look at what I learned. And then we can start to offer that back.
Oh, that's the process of alchemy that you're talking about.
And then we start to offer it back.
Yeah, I love that Monopoly analogy. That is so soothing and fitting, I think, for anyone listening. And I love that you said the more that we have in our childhood, or whatever you want to call it, trauma, whatever, the cracks maybe that you feel you have in your soul, and Rumi says this, that's where the light enters you. And when you allow that light to enter you, that wisdom, you actually notice that you are a wholesome human, and you get to use these parts of you, use them, alchemize them, turn them into gold, like in Monopoly.
Yeah. I was at a workshop once, and it was a pelvic healing workshop for women. And so there was a lot in the room, right? And there was this one woman, this elder that was in the room. And when the young girls would really hit an emotional thing, or even me, she would show up with her mama bear and she would hold. And I remember when I had hit my tender point, she came and she was holding me, and all I felt was this immense gratitude for all the work that she had done, and for all the experiences that she had had in her past that made her able to not shy away from my pain, and to be able to hold my pain so fully that able to move into healing, right? So when we do our work, we literally become less activated by other people's stuff. And when we're less activated, we're able to hold that neutral space for them, and able to hold them and mirror for them what is possible, right? And the healing can just happen. So as we do our work, as we meet these little parts of ourselves that need our love and our attention and our acceptance, and then and we start to move into peace with what we've experienced in our life, and we start to say, yeah, but this is who I am, all of it. Now we're able to offer that back to the world in a way that is so needed.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Beautiful.
needed.
And we're all teachers and students
You're
in
all
this life.
for all students. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end.
Yeah.
Dr. Cari Schaefer, you are magnificent and such a gift for us on the summit.
Yeah.
Truly. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you for having me. It was really my pleasure. And we have
honor.
said it, but I look forward to more with you.
I know there's more coming. I feel that for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely more to come.
I am so grateful that you came on to share your invaluable wisdom and amazing storytelling for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Bye for now.
Bye.